Guys, so welcome back to another video, and today I want to show you guys how to actually install Docker on your local machine for your development purposes. So in my previous video, we actually talk about what's in exactly in a Docker and how you as a developer can utilize Docker, especially when it comes to development as well as deploying new applications on a production server or even on a testing server. So for those of you guys that don't know what Docker is, I would leave a link to my previous video where I actually explain some of the technical concepts of Docker and why you as a developer must actually start using Docker. So in a nutshell, Docker basically now a containerization software that is being built for developers. So for breaking down, so a Docker container, basically they help you for pack all your application dependencies and then deploy them easily by just pulling down by building a Docker image from the Docker file. And if you guys want to know what a Docker file is, I'll definitely leave a link to my previous video where I actually explain what a Docker file is and how we can actually create one. So with Docker, we always can get this issue of say, okay, I develop on a Windows machine, but then when I want to run it on a Linux operating system, there is this kind of dependency issue or file system issue and all of that. But with Docker, you can actually bundle all your application dependencies, including the source code, into one container, one lightweight image, and then you upload this image. And from this image, you can definitely run multiple containers. So with one Docker image, you can definitely able to run multiple containers. So today we did download what we call Docker Desktop, because if you're on a if you're on a Mac or Windows PC, you're definitely going to be using Docker Desktop. And also if you're on Linux, Linux has the Docker engine, and probably I'll be making a separate video on how to download Docker engine or also install Docker engine on a Linux operating system. But if you're on Windows or Mac, you can easily go to the official Docker website, where I'll definitely leave a link to the website below. So you can easily, it will take you directly to this page, and then you can choose your operating system if you're on Windows or Mac. And if you're on Mac, if you're either using the Intel chip or the Apple chip, then you can select any one of the options and then you click on download. Also, for those of you guys that are using Ubuntu desktop, you definitely can download it for Linux. But if you are running on a server OS, so the one that does not have a graphical user interface, then I'll definitely show you guys how we can install that. So select the operating system that you want to download for, click on the download button, and it will definitely download. But I think I already have it downloaded, so I don't need to download Docker Desktop again. And the installation quite simple. It uses the executable file. You double click on the executable, and then I think it's just next, just like how you install any other application. But I already have Docker installed, so it's going to ask me if I want to allow this application to make changes, blah blah blah. But since I already have Docker installed, I will definitely not be doing this one, so I'll just click on no. But follow the instructions on how to install them, and if you have any issues while installing it, you definitely let me know, and I will definitely help you guys out. All right, so if we go over this website, after you've successfully installed Docker Desktop, you would have this kind of graphical user interface. I'll pull mine up in a minute, but this is exactly what it's going to look like for Linux, or for Windows and Mac users. You see it has different tabs, but this is definitely going to be your user interface, and I'll definitely walk you guys through on how to go on what these components actually do on Docker Desktop. So what's Docker Desktop? So it says it's the fastest way to containerize application, and as I mentioned earlier, with Docker you can easily build an image, and an image is basically a lightweight, kind of like an executable file that has every single thing that your application depends upon. Let's say, for example, if you're running if you're building a Python application, you know that you need your requirements for txt file, and also you must run the application on a Python environment. yada 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 and all. So with Docker, you can easily create the Docker file, give them all the list of instructions that you need on how to run this application, and then you just run few commands, and it would be definitely going through some of those commands that you would be using most of the time for building an image, pulling an image from Docker repository and all of that. So Docker is built for developers and also business velocity. And what this means is basically, as a developer, it is much more easier if you start using, if you start developing your applications in Docker, because when deploying it, it's just like the same thing. You just push the image to the Docker repository, and then on your production server, you run your Docker command, pull these images down, and then you spin up a container. It is that simple. And ever since I started using Docker, I don't think there's anything else that would make me stop using Docker, because it has actually increased my development and also deployment. Reduce my development time and also my deployment time, because if I want to deploy an application, I do not have to go through the whole traditional way, writing scripts or actually zipping the file, moving them over to the server and all of that. So let us see. Let me just pull over the Docker desktop screen. All right, so when you install Docker for the first time, this is the screen that you will be greeted with, and it has different tabs that you can play around with. So here on the first one, we have containers. Let me see if I can just okay, I think this is fair enough. So when you initially install Docker, you'd have no containers running, and I do have containers running, but I just filtered, and I do not have any container that has the name hello. So I just want the interfaces to be the same, but you guys would have no containers running. And also, if you go to images, you would have no images. And volumes, we'll definitely talk about Docker volumes, but it will be kind of empty, just like how this is right now. And these are the tab dev environments. This is still, you can create a development environment or whatever. Docker Scout, this is something that we'll cover in some other tutorial. And also it has a learning center where you definitely can ask a few questions or go through some guides on how to do some certain things on Docker. But for now, we do not have any image, or we do not have any container running, right? So some of the few commands that I'll be walking you guys through today, I like the basic commands that every Docker user is familiar with. So basically, after installing an application, you'd want to check if the application is successfully installed. So in that case, you would pull up a command prompt if you're on Windows, or you pull up on an item if you're on Mac. And then the first command that would be running is actually checking the version of Docker that we installed on our operating system. So in order for us to check the version, we do docker -- version, and then it is supposed to give us the version of Docker that is currently installed on our operating system. As you can see, Docker version 24.0.2, but it might be different from what you guys already have, but this is kind of like the command that you run to actually check out the version of Docker that is currently installed on your system. Now, there are a few commands that we would be going over. We have Docker pull, we have Docker images. So basically, the Docker pull command, it is used to download images from the Docker repository. And a Docker repository is basically kind of like a GitHub repository, wherein for GitHub we normally host our application source codes on GitHub, and it's the same thing with Docker Hub. Docker Hub basically allows you as a developer to be able to build images and then share these images with other developers. Now, if you go to hub.docker.com, you'd see lots of images. Let's say, for example, you want to run a Postgres database, but you do not actually want to install Postgres on your host machine. Probably you're experimenting with Postgres, trying to get yourself familiar with Postgres. You can easily pull the image from the Docker Hub, and then you spin up a container. Now if you click on this Postgres image, this was built by the official Postgres. As you can see, it's a Docker official image. It was built by the Postgres team. So all you need to do is Docker pull and then the name of the image that you're actually trying to pull. Now there are different tags. We'll talk about Docker tags in another video. But basically, when you click on the image, you'd see a description and also ways in which you can run the Docker image. So if we go back to official images and then let's just search for hello world. I think they have an hello world Docker image. Yeah. So the hello world image basically is something that you just pull just to check that, okay, I can actually run a Docker container. So if we go back to our terminal and then we type in, you see this command, let's just copy this command from here, copy, and then we paste it in our, okay, so Docker run hello world. So what it does is it actually checks your local machine to see if you have the hello world image downloaded already or it has been cached. If not, it reaches out to the Docker repository and then pull down the image. After pulling down the image, it spins up a Docker container automatically. And with this one image, you can run multiple containers. You can run 5 instances of this hello world application. So with the Docker run command, if we just hit enter, you see it says unable to find image locally, so it is definitely going to pull it from the it definitely going to pull it from the Docker repository, and now it's actually running the image. Now it prints out hello world. This message shows that your installation appears to be working correctly. So if we go back to our Docker desktop, you see we have a hello world container. Initially we had no containers running, but we have an hello world container, and this name is a randomly generated name by Docker, but you can actually specify a name of your container when you're running it so that you can be able to identify the containers. Now if we go to images again, you see we already have the Docker image downloaded in our to our local machine. So if we want to run the same command again, it would not download the same image, but it would use a cached version, the one that we already have on our host operating system. So you see, this time it is even much more faster than the first one because it prints out hello world. It doesn't have to go and download the image again. It prints out hello world and then with any other messages, and it exits. So that is it for the Docker run command. So the Docker run command, basically what it does, it's a combination of the pull and then the run. With the pull, you're actually downloading the images, but you're not running a container. So you can just do like Docker pull and then hello -world. Now it actually downloads the without specifying the tag, it downloads the latest. And now since we already have it downloaded, it doesn't take much time. So it gives you the latest image, right? Now the other Docker command that you would be using most of the time, but if you're on Docker desktop, you definitely do not have to do this because you can actually see the images that are already downloaded on your local machine. But one useful one is Docker images. So Docker images basically is used to list all Docker images that have been downloaded on your local machine. Now if I click on enter, you'd see I have lots of images because I have been working with Docker previously. So it shows me now this one was the one that we recently downloaded, the Docker image that we recently downloaded. So you see it's actually, I have tons of images in my Docker machine. All right, so in order to list out the images, you just type in Docker images. That is if you'll be using the command prompt mostly. But if you go to your Docker desktop, you're definitely able to like find the Docker images there. And also another useful command that you would be using most of the time is if you actually want to see all of the containers that are actually running on your machine, right? Now, if with the Docker desktop, you go to containers, and then it gives you the list of containers that are running. Now if I clear this filter, you will definitely see lots of containers that I have running right now. So let me just clear this one, and then you see I have lots of containers running, lots of containers. But let me just filter back to hello, so you can see we have the hello world image that we recently downloaded, and these were the two containers that we actually ran from, executing the docker run command. So if you're not using the Docker desktop, or you actually want to see the Docker images that are running, you just do Docker PS. Docker PS, basically it lists all the running Docker containers. So you see these are all the Docker containers that are actually running. But the Docker PS basically does not give you all of the containers that are actually running. Now with the Docker PS, you have a -A flag. That means you're telling Docker to actually list every single container, whether they're running or probably whether they've exited or whatsoever. So you see it gives us more, because we only have like 4 that are actually running, and some of these ones have actually been exited. So that was why when you actually run the Docker PS without the -A flag, it just gives us the Docker containers that we are running. So we have the container ID and also the image that they are running off from, and also they have a Docker command, that is their entry point command, the data they were created, the status, and also the ports that they're using, and also the unique name that we give them. This name is actually used to like identify the containers. So another useful command is the docker stop command. So if we actually have a container that is running, and then we might actually want to stop that that container. Let's say, for example, I would use one of these which one should I actually use? I've actually exited some of these containers, but let me just do a Docker PS. So Docker PS basically lists out every single container that is actually running, right? Let's say we want to stop the container with this ID, yeah? So we just do a docker stop, and then we specify the container ID. Now we copy this one, and then we paste. Sorry. Okay, we copy the container ID and then we paste. Now if we click enter on this command, it actually stops the Docker container, but I do not want to stop this Docker container, so I'm actually going to leave it running. Or we can actually use the name. If you actually know the name of the container, you just do a Docker stop, and then you list out the name of the container that you want actually want to stop. So if you click on enter, it is actually going to stop the running container. All right, guys, so basically that's it for this tutorial on how to install Docker, and also some of the few commands that you'll be using. In an upcoming video, we'll do a comprehensive tutorial on how we can create Docker images, and then walk you through the steps in actually creating Docker images, and after creating Docker images, how we can actually push these images to Docker Hub, and also pull them down to our local machine again whenever we want to use them. Yeah. All right, so thank you very much for watching.